Dig on America. Breaking barriers.
Welcome to Breaking Barriers, guys. This is Dino Moore and my co-host,
Kimberly K. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Kimberly. How are you today?
Oh man, it's been a wild day. I wish I could just be like, I'm amazing. Today was not one of those days. It was a good day. It was just one of those busy days where you're like, wait, I still have another show that I'm doing. I forgot about that. I was like, wait a minute, I can't turn it off yet. I gotta be going. So it's been pretty interesting. The kids are gone, so it's been quiet around here. And as much as you have kids, as much as I miss them, I'm sort of like, you know what? I could get used to this. It's a good thing they graduated 2 weeks ago.
Life out on the left coast must be great. I'm looking at you and like the sun is hitting you just right. I'm in the dark over here on the east. Like you are like sitting in sunshine, looking great. We had go ahead.
Like I'm looking, like what you have behind you is what I'm looking out my window.
This is in honor of you. Last week you had the whole plant thing happening. I went and found me a rainforest. I'm like, I'm gonna chill with Kimberly in the rainforest next week. Okay, let's get started today. We are honored today. As a matter of fact, we're gonna start with I've learned this today. The breakdown. Boop. Whoa, there it is.
Whoa.
The breakdown will be our beginning segment to every show. So today we're going to introduce everyone with the breakdown. We're going to have an extended breakdown. We're going to do a whole show of breakdowns. You think you can do that with me?
Oh, I'm with it. So for anybody who's listening to the playback or if you're listening live, what the breakdown is going to be each week is we're obviously doing breaking barriers the same way as we always said we would, bringing different perspectives, different parts of the conversation, being comfortable with the uncomfortable at times. But to break the ice with everyone who comes on, we are going to start each week with something called the breakdown, which is what you're in right now. We have a special guest with us as well, so we'll get to her in just a moment. But one of the things that we're going to be doing each week is the breakdown will be the part of breaking barriers where we can go with each week's hot topics, sort of like if you watch The View, any of those sort of table topics type things. So each week we'll be tackling current events so that we can mix those in each week as you guys throw them in front of us, DM us, message us, Twitter, Instagram. Let us know what you would like to hear from us on the breakdown before Thursday. We'll try to get it in. We do our research. Obviously, today you did a lot of research, Dino. I was like, I don't even have to do the trending topics. So we're excited for that to be a part of the show.
And because our breakdown has so many legal topics, we had to call in the big guns.
We had to bring in
from Dig on America's show and analysis is Attorney Anna.
Yeah, you did that wrong.
I butchered it, I know.
It was close. It was analysis.
It's
okay.
the analysis.
It was the one extra in that threw everybody off. I was like, okay, that's okay. How are you guys? Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thank you so much for coming on. I mean, we're really honored to have such a perspective from you, both professionally. We know we're going to get that, but also you're a cool human too. So,
thank you guys. You guys are cool humans too.
So, first up,
you know, totally one of us. He said,
that was a good one. First up, we are going to talk about WNBA star Brittney Griner. Today in Russia, she was sentenced, and I'm going to read real quick. American women's basketball star Brittney Griner was convicted of deliberately smuggling drugs into Russia and sentenced to 9 years in jail Thursday in a case that has raised concern as she is being used as a political pawn in Russia's war against Ukraine. Not going to go much more. Okay, here we go. Judge Anna Sotnikova of the Kimchi City Court delivered the sentence and fined Griner 1 million rubles, which is like $10 in American money, something like that. No, it's like $16,400. She said the court took into account Griner's partial admission of guilt, remorse for the deed, state of health, and charitable activities. Prosecutor has asked that she be sentenced to 9.5 years in jail. So, there's something that happened. I have to say, I'm watching a television show called Designated Survivor. Right?
That's a good show.
Yeah.
This happened from 2013. Okay. On that show, there was a coach, a U.S. coach that took a track team to Russia, and they found drugs on this guy, and they arrested him.
Yeah.
And held him and used him as a pawn to try and get some people who had been imprisoned in the United States to get them back. And here we are, life imitating art as I see it. But because I smuggling, it's a little vape thing. They got her for smuggling.
Yeah. Is it life imitating art, or is it they particularly chose the show and recreated it? I mean, it's not imitating.
Well, the show's from 2013. That's what I'm saying.
That's
and this happened in... Oh, yeah. Did they get the idea from...
That's what I'm saying. Like, the Russian government is very technologically savvy on brand, on psychological influence. They know how to engage people on social media. So don't tell me that anything that goes up about anything Russian in movies, in anything pop culture, they're not aware of, they haven't seen. So it makes me a little too close for comfort.
I'm going to ask you this, Attorney Anna, because I heard that the United States is trying to get a prisoner who had been there for 15 years back, and Brittney Griner, and they'll do a swap for an arms dealer, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And so when this decision came down, he's seen a lot on Twitter, people like, oh, she deserved it, and this kind of whatever. But did she have to be sentenced first before they could do the prisoner swap?
So that I'm not sure of, only because of just my thought is that the Russian criminal justice system is probably markedly different, even probably in sentencing. Like the fact that they can even sentence her to that long for that type of crime. I'm not sure exactly what their protocols are, or if there were any procedural protocols, like you just mentioned, like whether she had to be sentenced for the swap to occur. My thought is that given the very highly political nature of it, that maybe it didn't have to be this way, but it didn't sound like, at least from what I have been reading, it didn't sound like America was really wanting to do the swap until later on, after it started getting a lot more steam and a lot more publicity, both in America and Russia, about what they wanted and what both sides wanted. So I'm not sure to answer your question.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Kim, let me ask you something real quick. Because I know you're into like international sports and you lived internationally and everything. Am I mistaken, or didn't Russia's whole like contingency get barred from the Olympics for drug use, and now they're uptight about drugs? Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky because there is alleged use of what they call juicing, different cocktails of certain things. It's not exactly the same drugs. Obviously, it's not considered the same thing. So you're going to get some people that are like, oh, well, it's just steroid use and it's just high performance. But yeah, it's an emotional topic a little bit, because if you read Brittney Griner, you read the letter, very personal. And I think that she did herself a service by writing the letter, obviously, because it did get more traction. But you read the letter, you know, she's very humanized in that letter. She talks about her wife. She talks about just wanting to be she's an American. She wants to be back here. She just wants to be back in her family, with her family. And I mean, she admitted sort of, allegedly, sort of partially. I don't like their wording of what they explained. I don't like the way the judge put exactly what she partially did or whatever. I think a lot of that sort of written a certain way to seem a certain way. But as far as Russia, we know that it doesn't matter if they were thrown out of the Olympics for drugs. I mean, they could have been all doing coke, and it wouldn't matter. They set their own rules at this point, and they are led by someone who's absolutely not at all in concern of what he looks like to anyone else other than what his vision of what he needs to look like. I mean, dude came from, it was at KGB, right? Is that the right analogy?
Yes.
I'm all tired, right? So like, the motto of that, if you look into the KGB, like just anything military with the KGB, like they are very, very old school in the way that they think. There's no progression in that regard. The way that we've sort of moved in our ways, some ways in the US, he's very old school. He wants like old Russia, like watching the wall fall was like disgusting for him. Like he hated that when all of that happened. So I think anything that he can do to sort of make Russia look like it looks right now, everything's a political move. And I think at this point, we need to be a little bit more, I'm not sure how to word this. We need to be a little bit more aware. I don't want to place blame. Okay. So I don't want to say it in the way that anyone did something wrong, but we need to be a little bit more conscious of any of our athletes going through the country. Anyone who's over there needs to be, conscious of being able to be yanked into some sort of political sort of war in any country. There should be, I believe she should have been given some sort of understanding of, hey, if you are going to take something with you, if there's something you have, you need to get rid of something, you need to make sure like you do not take it to this country. You don't want to put yourself in any place. It's not her. I'm not saying it's her fault. I don't even know what's true or not, from what all they've put out, but we've got to be a little bit more open with people at this point that not every country is, as accepting, or even our own country, like our system doesn't work. People use our system wrong all the time.
Attorney Anna, do you think the U.S. should have even allowed her? I know we're all about freedom, but to travel to Russia, like it's during the Ukraine war. We issue travel advisories all the time. Should there not have been one for Russia?
So I guess it just depends. And I hate saying that because I feel like that's a lawyerly, it could go either way. But I guess on one hand, if I'm in government, my thought is trying to balance like tensions with this country versus the practicality of like people being able to travel, people having the freedom to do that kind of stuff. And I don't know if there was a travel advisory put out for Russia, but I don't know if Russia would have given the Ukraine war, or I guess the Russian invasion on Ukraine. I guess maybe an act like that would have inflamed tensions. And to me, it seemed like the United States was trying to play this like on the fence thing where they didn't want to inflame tensions with Russia, which is to me why they didn't aggressively pursue her release a lot earlier than, in my opinion, if it had been LeBron James, if it had been Dwayne Wade, if it had been a male superstar athlete, they would have, spared no expense to try to bring that person home. But because it was her, we didn't even know about it, or at least the general public didn't even know about it until she was there for a couple of months and the WNBA started speaking out about it. And then I remember seeing all this coverage. And then I remember the government, the United States government being like, whoa, do we really want to trade an arms dealer for like a basketball player? And then it just became more and more. So like, just to get back to your original question, I don't know. I don't know what would have been the right move, because I guess there is also, a United States saying that we don't negotiate with terrorists. And I don't know if they will put Russia in the terrorism bucket. My thought is that we would, especially given the situation in Ukraine. But it seemed like they thought that this might go away. But obviously Russia kind of has an upper hand in this because they have a kind of high profile American in their custody, and under Russian law, based on what we know, it does appear that she did commit a crime. So, and that might be regardless of whether she intended to or not. And that's not to place blame on her, but the reality is that we as America had to make a decision. How badly do we want her home? And to me, it wasn't until public pressure really got involved that this type of discussion started to happen, what should we have done? Should we have acted earlier? With what level of vigor should we have approached all of this?
Do we think, and Kimberly, do you think because Russia's so anti-LGBTQ, you think that also had something to do with them choosing her?
It's hard to say. A lot of this is gray area, and you're going to see me tonight from this angle that Anna took. Is it Anna or Anna? Sorry,
Anna.
Anna, I'm going to get it wrong the whole time. As we go through these topics, I'm prepared of what you're going to which ones you're going to come at me. So from the woman perspective, I think there's a lot that plays on the fact that Anna hit it exactly on. If this was LeBron James, if this was anybody else, like that was a man, I think this would have gone much differently. The fact that she's also the LGBTQ side, I think that's more on Russia. I don't think that had anything to do with the U.S. Exactly. U.S. is more of the woman's side. So throughout tonight's topics, you're going to see some things that I have to say on the woman's side of every topic. I started to see a theme in my notes. So I just know how it's going to go before we get started. But, I think that Russia, obviously, if it just added to it. It's sort of like an icing on the cake for them. Absolutely. And we also have to remember, once again, Russian propaganda is super hardcore, legit. Like they're really good at mind control of their own population, of keeping things out, of making people feel a certain way. So yes, of course, that culture is very anti. So remember, they're going to be much less empathetic to a woman and a black woman, and empathetic to a black woman NBA star who is gay. They really ticked a lot of boxes there. So I don't think it was an actually full setup. I'm not sure of like, we're going to place this person here. But my concern is, or my worry or my frustration is that the U.S. did not have proper things in place to say, you know what, if you're going into this country, you don't have to do it publicly. You don't have to issue a big travel warning, but someone should have said, made sure managers, the WNBA, her managers, hey, make sure in this country during a time of war, you are paying attention. And again, not to place blame, but more to say, in hindsight, maybe a more conversation should have been had of the seriousness of what can happen in that country. And it likens it to some of the Americans that have been, done this way, sort of in like Singapore or Thailand, where drugs are placed in their bag so that they're allowed to, so that they're taken in by the police in the local areas and then used for leverage against other things and people that have. This is not new, by the way. The whole leveraging to get someone out of a U.S. prison from countries. This is not our first engagement with this type of thing. This is a more public one, of course, and the government hasn't talked about it as much. The WNBA didn't talk about it as much because, of course, everybody wants to keep it on the down low. Like, if we can get her home, we don't mess with the brand of the WNBA, her brand. We don't put her out there, put our business out there, put our stuff out there. But unfortunately, day one, it should have been a discussion, should have been, news, because as much as it's her business, it's also her life now, and 9 years of it potentially. She'll come back to a whole different life. She will have nothing of what she had before. I'm also to add doom and gloom. But I'm saying if they don't do the trade, and if she was to live out 9 years, and the reason I'm saying this is because Twitter is just like, she deserves this. But like, I just want people to be more empathetic to what's going on in 9 years of her life for what would not be given the same thing here. So when you are watching Twitter and people are saying she deserved this or that, think of your cousin, think of your next door neighbor, your friend, and think would they deserve to have 9 years of their life ripped away, their careers, their family, their children, their wives, for what would be a vape pen of sorts. Just, what kind of reference are you using here? Because I think people are taking her, and I'll round my point here. They're taking her as like, she's over there. I don't know her. She doesn't look like me. She doesn't represent my community, my feelings, anything American. But if you thought of your next door neighbor, your church pastor, something like that, I think people would have a different way of looking at it. Some are still going to be who they are, but just hoping people would look at it a little bit differently from a personal human level.
Definitely. And Attorney Anna, you were saying, can you hear me, Attorney Anna? Okay. I'll say this. I just know every time that she appears in court or I see her being drug around by those cuffs, and she's so much smaller than she was. I mean, she's like, she looks almost emaciated, and she looks so miserable. And so it's hard to see. And so, you know, you got to have some kind of that empathy for that. Attorney Anna, you were making a point.
Yeah, sorry, I had some technical difficulties over here. But one thing I want to say, following up on what Kimberly K was saying, was basically, well, two things. The first thing is just thinking about what it means to have an American in Russian custody at a time like this, because like, I don't know what the Russian messaging is to its citizens, but just internationally, Americans have a very a lot more liberal culture than a lot of other type of homogenous places like Russia. So like, I can imagine the messaging being like, these Americans are so arrogant. Look at her coming over here thinking she can break our rules, thinking she could, you know, do whatever she wants to do in this country at a time like this where America is trying to oppose us. They're trying to get everybody in NATO. They're trying to assist Ukraine in this war against us when we're the good guys. And you know what I mean? Like I can't imagine that there's a general sense of empathy for her among Russians. And I can't speak for everybody, but my thought is just that I can't imagine that the messaging would be sympathetic or empathetic to her. And relatedly, and this was really more so following up on what Kimberly K was saying, is that the empathy that we should also have, and the lack of empathy that folks are showing on like Twitter and things like that, is the same empathy that we should have for people who are currently incarcerated for minor drug crimes. Like there are a lot of people in American, like, because it's not just Russia that's doing this to people, it's also Americans, like people that are in jail or have served time and lost years of their life. They came back to nothing. They came back to nobody because of minor crimes like these. And it's easier, I should say, for us to look at somebody like Brittney Griner and be like, oh, one vape pen, that's so stupid. I can't believe like they would do all of this 10 years over one vape pen, when there's a whole bunch, hundreds or thousands of people in jail right now for things that maybe they just didn't have enough money for counsel to be able to appeal something and get them out, or maybe they couldn't take advantage of a law, or they didn't know their rights. So I think the whole thing goes both ways.
Yeah, or they took plea deals they shouldn't have taken because
exactly. They're taking plea deals. They're admitting guilt to things that we can see clearly. The president and everyone else is saying like, okay, this is not that big of a deal, but it's like we have people sitting in jail right now for stuff like this. So I just want to say like the same intensity and passion that we want Brittney Griner to come home is the same type of energy that we should be having for our own citizens that are also currently unfortunately incarcerated or facing criminal penalties for this kind of stuff. Because even though weed has been decriminalized or made legal by certain states, it is still federally illegal. And I don't know if we'll talk about the Amon Shumpert situation, but he was just incarcerated, or brought in on charges of having, I believe, a few ounces of weed on him at the airport, which is a federal place. Like it's still illegal there. So it's like, every place does not have American culture. Every place does not consider weed to be this like, you know, cigarettes or alcohol kind of thing. Like in some places it's really that bad. So I want you to
answer a comment, Attorney Anna, from Facebook.
Okay.
From Tony. When Americans travel, we have to make sure we follow the rules and laws. Laws are laws.
I would agree with that you should try to generally be aware of the laws. But I think that as a human, though, sometimes and even as a lawyer, you can't know every single law about everything all the time. Like, and now, should she have been traveling with that? Did she know it was you know what I mean? Like, maybe she forgot it was in her bag. Like, we don't know. Yes, laws are laws, but also the whole point of law is to be able to assess a situation with the totality of the circumstances, to assess, did somebody intend to break this law? Did they not intend to break this law? What was the severity of the crime? And how should we punish this person? And it seems like 10 years for someone who, whether they mistakenly had this vape cartridge or not, is excessive. You know what I mean? Like, okay, 5 years would have probably been excessive. Now, if they said 1 or 2 years, that would have been kind of harsh from an American perspective, in my opinion. But I would still have to respect that those are Russian laws. But at the same time, just look, on balance, 10 years is kind of a long time objectively for that type of crime. But Tony, yes, laws are laws, but I would hope that the criminal justice system in that country is not being taken advantage of or improperly utilized in the way that it is because of politics that really aren't related to her are impacting her case.
Can I say something, Dino, before you move on? I agree. Obviously, laws are laws, but you also need to be aware of the laws, like I said before. And that's something, that's a whole another conversation that we don't know the whole story to, between management, her own decisions, what's truth and what's not. But for the Tonys of the world, I'll say, and until it's your sister, until it's your mom, your cousin, you're all about laws are laws until you're looking down 9 years of not being able to see your loved one, and they're coming back to a different world. Like in what Attorney Anna said, there's so many discrepancies even in our own country. San Francisco released everybody who, part of San Francisco, I think it was San Francisco, that had those drug charges when weed was legalized. They released everyone who had a weed charge because it was now legalized, right? But it made no sense to keep people in jail on something that's now legalized. The rest of the country has not even done that. In places that have legalized weed, they have not let go of people because they say, well, laws are laws. Even though we've evolved and we've decriminalized marijuana in certain states, we've legalized recreational use in certain states, we still have people sitting in jail for 30, 40 years on a weed charge when you've got, bro dudes running around getting high with their friends because it's recreational and legal now. We have disparities and discrepancies in our own laws. So laws are laws is not really exact like science to me, because there's just so much that the system does not exactly fall in line with. Because if laws are laws, that means that what we're going to get to later on Breonna Taylor and different things, the police department shouldn't have walked through my door the other day and slammed me to the ground because they thought that something happened, because my daughter read a text wrong and thought I had a seizure and did a well check, and we'll get to that. But they broke, the police officers in our country broke laws. So we need to be a little bit more like open to not using the word laws are laws and so much of that literal term all the time, because there's a lot that we don't actually, we don't like it if it comes our way. When our cousin, aunt, daughter, friend, husband, wife, if it happens to them, it's a very different story for the Tonys. I just had to get
Can
that
I add
out.
one more thing? Sorry, I just on this topic. Laws are laws, and I echo everything. But at the same time, the lawyers, prosecutors have, once the violation of the law is established, prosecutors have discretion about how to enforce that law and the manner of punishment that is to be issued as a result of that violation. So like, we all agree that the law was broken. So like, yes, but now we're talking about the punishment. Now we're talking about what you're asking for to happen as a result of that violation. And I think that's markedly different than saying like, was the law violated versus what should happen when the law is violated. And I think that's what we're more so talking about rather than the fact that the law was actually broken.
Of course, yeah. But
from Facebook, I got another comment. I want you to comment on this as well as I tell you. It's from Facebook. Darnell says,
"Hey, Darnell,
America can't take a high road because when people come here, they will tell you in America, ignorance of a law is no excuse. So even if you break a law that you don't know you broke, you're still going to jail."
Yeah.
Yes.
I can get that point. Yes. But, something that really is not sticking well, like landing well with me, is that Russia, in return of Brittney and the other, I think there's a journalist as well that's being held captive that's sort of part of this as well. They want us to trade, which, I would do whatever if it was me, but they are wanting an arms dealer that has been actively participating in war for terror to be back in their country. Like they're actively pursuing and campaigning to have an arms dealer back in their country. But Brittney is, dangerous or, just a menace to society over a vape pen. Like that there's something that does not fit right, that they're literally saying, we want the arms dealer back. Like, we will hold on to the young lady that broke a law intentionally or unintentionally, but we want the arms dealer back in our country. That's wild to me, that you would be like, oh, let's get the arms dealer back, unless it was anything other than he's really there's some, he's a legit person that they need back, and the connections and all the things he did. So I just think that's wild that, we can talk about laws and we can talk about what she looks like and the politics of it all, but this other dude that we're swapping is an arms dealer. And I'm like, well, there's gonna be a lot of arms dealers, so let him go. Like, someone's already replaced him in the game already in my brain. Like, let her get home to her family. But at the end of the day, it's just wild that Russia people don't see just that weird sort of dynamic of, we would like the arms dealer, the illegal, like, global arms dealer, brought home to our country, back into our country, over the young lady with the vape pen. That just seems bizarre.
I think that on that, Kimberly, I think that's interesting because it really forces the United States' hand, because we normally wouldn't make that kind of we normally wouldn't make that kind of trade in the first place. Right. And it also is forcing the situation to play out on a public stage. Like, how bad do you want this girl back? Right. Like, because now you have public outcry on it. And for you to exchange an arms dealer, which is kind of unprecedented for the type of trade that they're trying to make, and for it to happen in front of everybody like this, the United States, for them to make that kind of concession would be huge. And in the eyes of what I anticipate or imagine for Russia, that would be to say that you got the United States to make that kind of trade would be a huge ego boost for a country like Russia. And so that's why I think that initially the United States was trying to toe the line on that, because they're like, we wouldn't normally do that. Yeah. But again, she's a high profile person. She's a WNBA player. Everybody kind of knows her by name, things like this. She's a Black woman, LGBT. Like, she represents all of these people that are now interested in this case, or in her case, I should say. So I think that's the Russia only can win here. You know what I mean? Like, worst case, they have an American in custody. Best case, they get a high profile arms dealer back and forces the United States to do that. So like, you know what I mean? Like, for us, it's lose-lose. Like, either we get rid of the arms dealer, with the win being getting Brittney Griner home, or we're going to keep our guy because we aren't used to making those kind of concessions. Because that would be a really, really big deal, I think, diplomatically for the United States to start doing that. Because what happens when the next American in another country does that? Then what? You know what I mean? Are we going to keep giving up high profile people for that?
Yeah, anytime. This is my concern. I mean, again, I'm all about getting, our girl home. I mean, like, I don't want to say our girl. I don't mean it that way. I just mean like our country, our person. Mm-hmm. But the thing is that it sets a precedent. And like I was saying earlier, like, it's too close to comfort for what's playing out in this TV show to now be playing out in reality. So it becomes playing out on a world stage. So what happens when you have Americans that are traveling overseas for Olympics, for different things, for all of these different games, traveling in any capacity that's high profile? You've got musicians, you've got artists, you've got NBA players, of course, any of those. What happens when somebody from a country decides that they want to use them as bait and plants something? Because I don't put it past anyone to do something like that. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but we know that the police here do it. So what happens when they plant it because they need to get one of their people back? It becomes the go-to. Well, they did it with Russia. And then, I asked this on Facebook the other day with somebody going back and forth with me. I said, what if, and I'm not going to say the name just for reasons, it's just, I'm not going to bring them into it negatively. But I said, like, a white country singer who's very popular. I said, so, I mean, he clearly talks about traveling with drugs. Like, he talks about, like, he cannot go anywhere without his weed. So if he would have got caught, how would you feel about it? Because he's such a more high profile than Brittney Griner. So, like, what would you feel then? And of course, people are always going to be like, I'd feel the same. No, you wouldn't. You would be campaigning like it was just a little weed, like, Biden, you need to get him home right now. Like, if it was right-wing America and one of their country singers had broken, like, just with a little vape pen they would have been picketing. They would have been at the White House trying to get their dude back. And the one that I'm talking about is very high profile in the country music, country rap kind of world. So I just think the level, like, she is high profile. She does fit a lot of these communities, but she's not to the level of high profile in the way that the rest of America cares. There's half of America that cares.
Of course.
You know what I mean?
Of
So
course.
that's also discrepancy that I think is happening here too, is that we don't have enough of a collective, like, you know, somebody that everybody would have been like, no, that's not what happened. You had half of the world, and it's now political because they don't care, because she's a black woman. She's a black woman who's married to a woman. So she's LGBTQ, and she's in the WNBA. So there's already dudes that are from right-wing side that already don't even like that situation. There's just so much that, you know, that's against her, even within our own country. So you get a place like Russia, it's game over. And I mean, I think we all saw this coming this way, but I don't know how it plays out. I think it's going to be interesting, as Anna said, and I know we've taken a lot of time on this, but this is one I was pretty passionate about from the jump when you told me about it today, just because I read her letter, and it gets you right in the heart. So.
No. Well, staying with the theme of law and order, 4 U.S. police officers have been arrested and charged over the fatal shooting of Breonna Taylor. Breonna Taylor was 26 years old and a decorated emergency medical technician. She was killed in her home in Louisville, Kentucky on 13th March 2020 by plainclothes police officers who were executing a no-knock search warrant. The hospital worker was shot as officers stormed the apartment just after midnight while she was with her boyfriend, Kenneth Walker. Her death sparked racial injustice protests around the country. Federal investigators say that 3 of the 4 officers conspired to falsify the arrest warrant that led to Miss Taylor's death. Only one officer involved in the raid, former Louisville detective Brett Hankinson, had been previously charged over the case. He was the only one of the 4 charged on Thursday who was present at the scene of Miss Taylor's shooting. Mr. Hankinson, who fired 10 shots during the incident, was acquitted by a jury earlier this year of endangering Miss Taylor's neighbors when some of the bullets he fired entered their home. And we're going to talk about the fact that he got charged with the neighbors stuff and not her. But the other officers charged by the Department of Justice are Joshua James, also a fired officer, and serving officers Kelly Hanna, I guess they're still on duty, Godlet, Kelly Hanna Goodlet, Kyle Meany. Louisville police say they are trying to fire Mr. Meany and Miss Goodlet. Trying to fire. We're going to look into that. What's that all about? The federal indictment announced by Attorney General Merrick Garland accuses the 4 of civil rights offenses: unlawful conspiracy, unconstitutional use of force, and obstruction. So they say Mr. Meany and Mr. James are alleged to have violated Mrs. Taylor's civil rights by preparing false search warrant affidavits. Ms. Goodlet allegedly conspired with Mr. James to falsify the warrants. Mr. Hankinson is accused of civil rights offenses for firing his service weapon into Miss Taylor's apartment through a covered window and glass door. So that's justice, I guess. It at the hands of the Justice Department. Attorney Anna, why didn't we see some charges like this coming from the state?
Well, so it sounds like those are federal charges. So the civil rights violations, if I'm not mistaken, are probably Section 1983 charges. Did it say? Like when you're acting under the color of state law, or excuse me, you're acting under the color of law. I'm not sure, but long story short, a lot of these, a lot of certain crimes there are crimes that belong to the state, and then there are crimes that belong to the federal government, and the state prosecutors cannot prosecute federal crimes, but federal prosecutors can prosecute both state and federal crimes like together. So if the state declined, or if there were no other charges on the state level and that just kind of went away, then the feds could come in if there's evidence that they committed a federal crime or may have committed a federal crime, the DOJ could come in, or whatever other federal prosecutors that have jurisdiction could come in and charge with those crimes. Now, the timing of all of this beats me. I don't know why it's so late, 2 years late, almost into year 3. So I'm not sure really what the timing it was. Maybe the DOJ had to do their own investigation, which might have been different from the state investigation. Maybe because they have different things to prove, potentially. And again, I'm not a criminal attorney, so I'm just kind of guessing based off what I know. But what I think may have happened was that they had a parallel but different investigation, and then it resulted in different outcomes. And now, and maybe those laws were a little bit more broad, where they could kind of scoop up these other officers where they weren't necessarily charged on a state level, like the one particular officer that you mentioned.
But filing, they say they filed a report that said the boyfriend, they definitely had, information about drugs being dealt out of that particular home, which apparently is false. Isn't that a filing? That's filing a false police report or something. I don't know if it's about a state, but that's lying. Yeah. I mean, and the fact that they're still employed, there's some that are still employed. That goes to the very heart of our trust in the system.
Yeah, so I can't speak to whether the filing or the false filing is a state or federal crime. I'm just not sure on that. But the distrust and mistrust, I think, is something that we've just grown accustomed with law enforcement generally, especially as it concerns Black people in this country, Black and brown people. But also, it's difficult because it's like, we unfortunately discuss these issues after they happen. Not that we haven't been discussing them the whole time, but what can you do? You know what I mean? We have a system that says you have to go through these proper protocols and procedures. And a lot of times with these warrants, a judge has to sign off on them. But you know what I mean? How does the judge know that somebody's lying? The police officers are lying. How does all of the systems know when someone is lying about stuff like that? They can't know. So, and my thought is that if you already have a no-knock warrant, you already have the element of surprise. So what is the necessity of firing 10 shots? You can't be scared of somebody who doesn't know that you're coming. At least not 10 shots scared.
If I'm not mistaken, didn't the boyfriend fire shots when they kicked the door in?
I'm not sure.
I think he fired shots back because he felt no coming in his house shooting.
Because I know you feel some kind of way, Kim. I know you feel deeply about this, but I'm going to ask you to represent the right for just one moment. Because I do believe the boyfriend fired shots, right? These people kicked in his house in the middle of the night. They're sleeping. Where's the NRA on this? Why aren't they by that guy's side? Yo, we believe in this is everything we believe in. Good guy with a gun. You kicking my door. Now they found out the guy didn't do any wrong. You kicking my door. Do I not have the right to let off shots? And when my door comes crashing in, isn't that what the NRA is saying about us? We have the right to protect the sanctity of our home. Where's the NRA on this?
So it's a little tricky for me right now because I don't think anyone's safe after what happened on Friday. I'll get into that in a second.
Yes.
But I think if I had, if one of my family members that look like me were to be the ones that had been, claiming to be just trying to protect their family, and they were shooting because someone come in their house, it'd be a very different story. We'd have a lot of conflicted right-wing people even. It'd be a lot of oh no, those police officers did not have the right. Because I've lived in the South, I've lived in small town America. And so when the police officers do something to somebody who is protecting their own home or something like that, or, carrying a gun or whatever, the whole, the whole town is against the police officer. So it's very different for someone who looks like me, family members or whatever in some of those cases. But the thing is that people have to realize like Anna said, there's no way to prove anything. I'm going through this right now. Friday, my daughter read a text wrong from me. We have kind of systems in place for my chronic illness, seizures, if I'm at home by myself. So when I write things, they check in on me. So I have these nails and cannot type. It's not my vibe. My daughter, it's her birthday on Friday. Excuse me, my apologies. So I couldn't type, and autocorrect kind of said something like, I'm always saying something like, oh man, I feel like I'm dying, because I have chronic illness. So I typed something like that, but it came out like, I want to die or something like that. She misread it. She was at work. She's trying to go about her day. No one's at home. She couldn't get in touch with Sinjin, anyone. Keep in mind, we've already had a situation with Sinjin where he was almost shot in front of my children in this room I'm sitting in right now. And so, my family has already had a situation with this group of people, and they've watched different things go on here. I sleepwalk. They've been called by the neighbors. I've sleepwalked out of the house because of seizures and different things. So our address has sort of certain stigmas on it, just like Breonna Taylor's boyfriend did. It's not anything different that he did, or his life is like. No matter if he was a drug dealer or not, he's a human being. She's a human being. So for myself, it's a little tricky for me to try to take the right wing's idea of what you're talking about here, because looking like I do, they walked in my home. I was asleep. They thought that they had the right to come in my home. They saw some medicine bottles that were out because I put them in the pill counter. And so they looked at a bottle and, it was like, oh, it's empty. I don't know what they thought. I'm not going to try to get into all of that because we're in a legal process right now. But I come out of my room and they immediately just, grab me. It's two men. There's not even a woman present. I'm a sexual assault survivor, twice over. I'm in my home. I've not done anything. I'm not trying to be a victim here because I really want to focus on the Breonna Taylor case, but I really want to drive home, like, no one is safe. And until it happens to you, I already had already seen experiences growing up my whole life, but until it happens to you, you cannot sit and say, well, this way and the law and that, and he shot and this happened, because we don't know the truth. And just as much as I'm telling you the truth right here, there's going to be people that are going to say something like, I don't know. I'm not sure if Kimberly's telling the truth. Why would the cops just come in her house? I'm telling you, I don't know that answer. Makes no sense to me. I've sought the legal counsel that I need to, and they've told me that it wasn't legal for them to come in my home the way that they did. Furthermore, they had me disrobe because they said that I could be hiding drugs in my home when I made a comment of, the fuck would I be smuggling drugs from my bathroom to my kitchen? And it's because, I wasn't prepared. I had just woken up. I wasn't prepared. Like when this happened, I just woken up. My brain was just coming online. So the same thing with no knock warrants in the middle of the night, people sleeping. There's a psychology to all of this too. People are not prepared. Nobody knows what's going on. If you're woken out of your sleep, I don't know if you've ever seen somebody who fights when you wake them up too early. They have no idea what's going on. They don't even know where they're at. That's a very psychological, normal reaction that humans have, mental illness or not. I woke up, because I hear like two men in my home and they're, whatever the whole situation is, I end up on the ground. I have some, things on my knees. I'll live. I have my life as of right now. What's stick to this situation with myself is when I sought the idea of legal counsel, I was told that they would probably settle with me. That's not what, if you don't look like me, that's not the answer you get. I was told that, that type of thing has happened before. You'll probably get a settlement. It just, they just want you to talk about it. So because of legal process right now, I'm not saying exactly where and which place and all that right now. I'm trying to keep it within legal, I don't want to mess up the case or whatever, but I just want to make the point, like, there is no safety. There is no NRA, like, we're just protecting our homes. There is no, like, rules. The police decide. And I don't mean, like, the overall system of the police. I mean the individual police officer and his buddy and his friend and his ego and his God complex and his, I didn't get in trouble for the last 10 times I did a no-knock warrant or, falsified some documents on a stop on a black man 10 times over. So every time they get away with some shit like that, it just tells them that they could do it again. So the NRA, we already know, is going to be like missing in anything. The NRA is not going to stand up for a black man's life, a black woman's life. That doesn't fit that's not on brand for them. Unless it's a black man or a black woman that's standing up and having a gun, they're not going to show up on their website. They're not going to show up on their social media. But if you're a black woman or black man that's like, I carry my guns and I'm a proud patriot and I voted for Trump, they don't care what your life is about. They don't care. I mean, it's been shown. They don't even give a fuck about children's lives at this point. And I'm sorry to be so dramatic here, but do we think that they actually care about someone who looks like Dino, you, or this picture, or Anna, if they could slam me to the ground so easily and then make up shit later, and then they could let little kids get murdered, like fucking half their faces ripped the fuck off? I'm sorry for my language, I really am, but it's the only emotion I can express right now is anger. And I'll try to deal with that through this process of this evening, but that's just where I'm at. I don't believe that the NRA cares about anything to do with the gun ownership of a person, firing to protect his home if he's black at all. I don't care what anyone says. If it was a white country singer that looked a certain way, if it was a Trump supporter that was a politician, that, if that'd be a different story. There'd be some sort of conversation to be had. They'd be making sure that those charges were brought earlier to make an example out of someone so that they could keep their narrative going, maybe. But there's no way that NRA is showing up for anyone that looks like me. And I don't really even know the proper way to talk about this. That's what we're doing the show for. I may not be saying it the right way. I might be offending people on both sides, and I'm really sorry if I am. I'm trying my best to articulate as well as I can, but this is all I can get out right now. So I apologize for not answering the question as well as I could.
It's okay. My daughter's in law enforcement in Washington, D.C., and this is something, Attorney Ann, I'm going to say, they're really big on support the police. That's their thing, right? They're law and order people. So Breonna Taylor, they were absolutely behind the police officers. They got a right to go in there. This is how we catch criminals. Those no-walk warrants are needed. Where are they on the Capitol Police? For some reason, these police officers are the worst people in the world. And they represent the government who was wrong. And they just sentenced one of those guys to 7 years. And make that make sense to me. I don't, are we law and order when it suits our needs, or are we always law and order?
What doesn't make any sense to me. But what I will say, I guess, and before I get to that, one thing I wanted to say that before I lose it is, you had mentioned the question earlier, Dino, about why the police they're thinking about firing the police and maybe why they haven't been fired yet. You cannot underestimate the power of the police union. And that particular group is in place, extremely powerful, very well connected politically and otherwise. And their job is basically to make sure that officers have due process, much like any other union on any other job. But sometimes I guess really what the inherent problem is that the police officers are a group of people that are given the power to really enforce laws. They are law enforcement. And so when someone has that kind of power and they mess up, and then you already have an entity being like, well, we just got to make sure like best possible outcome, regardless of what actually happened. And then we don't want to start setting precedents like qualified immunity. Let's just say, like, if you're doing your job within the course and scope of your job, and then something happens, maybe you can't get charged in your individual capacity, which is kind of the gist of qualified immunity. When you start having things like that and those type of legal doctrines, really, it's just kind of difficult to just fire people without, a full investigation happening and then determining whether that officer's due process rights and right to work have been violated. So I just wanted to say that. But to your question, or to what you just kind of posed, it's always been kind of striking to me where the pro-police folk come down on police misconduct or even police intervention, because I remember watching at least the beginning of the January 6th hearings or the insurrection hearings and watching people who would otherwise likely support the police be yelling at these people, storming them down, calling them traitors, like all these other things, when they are the very people that were, back the blue. At the same time, I always hear this about the Second Amendment and we have to protect ourselves and they are going to come in and take our guns and things like that. But when you just kind of play that whole theory out, the people who would be coming to take your guns, law enforcement, are the people that you would be fighting, that you're supporting. So to me, I think that it's a convenience argument because a lot of times, at least I guess recently, but not the most recently, is that support the law enforcement came along when there were victims of color or when the police were being alleged of criminal misconduct against people who were seen or thought to automatically be stereotypically criminal. But now that we're seeing police engage with these groups of folks in a negative way and having negative encounters, I think we're starting to hear a bit different tone because it's clear, like we just talked about, like the Capitol Police, it's very clear that it's not always back the blue and there are caveats and carve-outs, and it does seem to fit whatever that individual's beliefs or ideology or personal narrative is. So I don't think that that's a constant. I think the support is, we support police against y'all. That's what I think it is. I think it's when y'all are saying y'all not criminals, no, we need the police in there. But if it's me and mine and the police are trying to interfere with me and mine, it's F y'all. So I think it's a moving target.
In talking with relatives, like I said, my family's from law enforcement. I talked with a cousin this week who told me no one hates a bad cop better than a good cop. But like you said, it's hard to get them out. He said, we do little things. This is what he told me. I kid you not. He said, we do little things like not talk to them. We just don't talk to them, or we won't go to lunch with them, or we do whatever. And then he goes on to say, though, they will, with the union, file a harassment / uncomfortable workspace thing.
The work environment.
So now we can't even not talk to them.
That's retaliation.
Again,
that's
it's psychology.
That's why.
It's when the bully feels like they've been disconnected, they've been alienated, they retaliate. They don't retaliate on their fellow officers. They're going to take it out on the people that they do traffic stops on. They're going to take it out on the people that they engage with, that they have power over. So as much as like I feel that your family's like, we try to do little things to get them out. I have family in law enforcement too. No offense to them, but it doesn't help. And that's been proven time and time again. It actually creates a sense of anger in them. It makes more rage, more like egotistical. I need that power over someone else because I'm not with them. It's a whole like high school mentality. You've got the whole like people who feel like they don't belong and all of that. When you come to school shooters and mindsets, they feel alienated and they're like, it's easier for them to go off on people because people are like, how could they hurt someone that's their age? And don't teenagers know that everybody deals with problems and all of that? No, when the alienated teenager has no friend, no nothing, they feel even more enraged. Same thing, you put a person in law enforcement and everybody's supposed to be, it's about a brotherhood, camaraderie, and they don't get that experience. They feel robbed of it. They feel like they're alienated. They feel bullied. And so what happens? That narcissistic, egotistical ego comes to the forefront and it starts to be put out on anyone that has no power to go back. So, I mean, that there's so many layers to this that I feel like these conversations always kind of keep going in circles. We always have to be like, well, it depends. It depends. But I think the one thing it depends on at the root level is the overall arching picture is, I just, not that she needs affirmation, of course not. Attorney Anna has it. But at the end of the day, it really does come down to what does a person look like? And again, like I said, small town America, when I grew up and where I grew up and when I go back, depending on if a person is backing a situation that is a person of like, it's like a white man that's well known in the community. And it's like, oh no, he did something that's not that big a deal, or he was, wrongly charged or whatever. They hate the police. Like that group of people that is pro-police, they hate the police in that particular town. But nationally, we love the police, except for this particular town right now, because they're going after somebody in my family that's well known or, like white, middle America, whatever. It's very I mean, she said it's a convenient argument of whatever convenient for the person. That's what I've watched everywhere I've lived. Everywhere I've lived, color has made a big difference, and status and all of those things come into play. So I don't think we could ask, where's the NRA? Where are the charges? Where's this? Why are these not? I mean, we all know that it's not going to happen from any level that is going to feel fair to anyone, because we keep living it. We keep watching it. It's a good question to have, to put out in front of people so that maybe it plants a seed. But I think we all know the answer still comes back to the same thing.
I'll say this, having seen the training my daughters go through, here's something I can understand. I'm going to empathize with the police for just a second. They show them videos. When you ask why does the police officer pull out his weapon on a traffic stop, they show them videos in training of police officers walking up to a car and getting shot dead. There's a lot of them out there, okay? And they show those. They show videos of officers going to homes to handle domestic violence claims and being killed. Like getting a guy who's beating his wife and they're putting him in cuffs and she comes out with a gun and shoots him in the back. Yeah. The woman who just got beat. You know what I mean? So they develop a mindset, and my daughter said this, they develop a mindset about this blue wall you're talking about. They live behind that because that's their shield. And they call the badge their shield, okay? And it becomes an us versus them mentality. And this them doesn't have a color. Anybody who they get a call on, they come out saying, is this the time that I die? Is this the call that kills me? So they act, like in your case, they act unreasonably. They go to the left because they're like, is this woman taking drugs? And I'm not making an excuse for them. Okay, I'm not.
Oh,
but there's a mindset that they have.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
And I have, like I said, I have friends. Go ahead, Anna. I spoke.
No, go ahead.
I have friends and I have family members that are police officers. I know what their training looks like. But I also have some family members that are in some really progressive areas where they're dealing with mental health type videos, and they're also being progressive in what they're being shown. So they're trying to tell people how to de-escalate and all of these other measures that are being put in place. And so that's humanizing people and not putting up that blue wall as much. So at the end of the day, like I empathize with officers going out and thinking, could this be my last day? Their wife asking, every time you're out, I'm having PTSD that like every time I hear something, I don't sleep until you get home. I can imagine what a family member of a police officer feels like because I live it. I have cousins and uncles and all these different things. But here's the thing. I don't quite agree fully, Dino, that they don't see color, that there is no color when they go out. I don't fully agree on that. I don't think that's what you meant fully, but just for the people listening back on this, I don't fully think that because I've literally seen it with my own eyes. I've seen people that don't feel me as a threat, but they see St. John as a threat in the same complainant call. I've seen the Houston police literally be called on something that's like a drug or weird behavior outside of a hotel. And they're talking to me like, ma'am. I mean, like you said, if we had a gun, if we were drug smugglers, whatever, like if I was in a domestic violence situation, I can shoot a police officer just as easily as St. John can. But they're not looking at me like that. They weren't treating me like that. They're, ma'am, sit down. Ma'am, go over there. I'm Facebook Living the whole thing, swearing at them, being belligerent, ridiculous because it was ridiculous, crazy. And St. John is just not moving, not talking, nothing. 45 minutes just, and you're a drug smuggler acting ridiculous. They were waiting for 1 inch. I watched it. It was a provocation, like get in your face, tell you things, make you flinch kind of thing. And St. John was like legit. If it would have been me, I would have flinched. I would have been like, whoa. And that would have been their end to be like, well, he came at me. I watched every angle that these police officers tried to provoke him to do anything wrong. And then when, I don't want to get into all the details, but when we were able to go, they were like, well, we still think that you're a drug dealer, but we're a drug smuggler, but we're going to let you go because we don't have a canine unit. Okay. You think we're like a big time drug smuggler, but you don't have a dog to prove it right now. So you're letting us go. But it was because I had a presence and I was Facebook Living it. So eventually Houston PD gets a call that this has gone big and people are sharing it around, and they don't want that to be live. Nobody wants to see the, what I'm showing happening. So I do think color plays a role, because lately what I'm watching, even though I had it, and what I want to do is kind of backtrack here. I don't want anybody listening to my story and going, see, she's blonde, she's blue-eyed, she's a white woman, so there's no disparity with color here. She was treated a certain way. I don't want anyone taking that and repurposing that some type of way. No, we still have this issue over here. Just because this happened, we're not going to like smoke screen and be like, well, they do that to anybody. Yes, anyone can have that, but we're looking at the likelihood. Like when you have, you're a smoker and you are over the age of 50 and you don't exercise and you have diabetes, you're more likely to have a heart attack, as opposed to the young person who doesn't smoke, doesn't, do drugs, doesn't do stuff. I think this is the same situation. Like the young person can still have a heart attack for any reason. We don't know. It happens to them. But the likelihood of it happening to an older person with these situations is higher. Same thing that's happened in my situation. Yes, it did happen to someone who looks like me, but the likelihood of it happening to someone like me is so much smaller than somebody who doesn't. And that was just the point that I was trying to get at. Not to really go against you, Dino, but I don't think women like, or however she identifies, people like your daughter I don't think she's looking at it that way. But I just think that we have to acknowledge that some of these groups of police officers, there's some really not mentally healthy things going on, whether it's they don't feel a part of their camaraderie with brotherhood and all of that, and they feel bullied and they're taking it out on the rest of the people, whether they're joining the police, because I've literally seen this happen. They join the police department because they're racist, because they want to injure people of color. And I know people don't want to believe that. I get called a conspiracy theorist on that on a daily, but I have literally seen the message boards of this type of recruitment that is anyone who's from Aryan Nation to Proud Boys to KKK in its more modern form, and all of those things being recruited into police stations. I've watched it in family members. So no one's going to tell me that I'm making it up, or I heard it, or I'm just being fed some bullshit. I found it. I was living, I'm not going to get into the specifics of people, but I saw it. I was logged in. I saw it as someone in a family member situation. And I was like, what in the hell is this? And it was literal recruitment for, if you were in the situation that you can go, and if you're in a situation where you can go and apply to be a police officer, this is your chance. This is your chance to get these type. It's what Attorney Anna said. This is your chance to get them off the streets, them out of our communities, them from buying the houses. Like literally, they make it that personal. We got too many of them in our community right now. We need y'all to go be a part of the police department so y'all can get them out. That's some like real shit. And I'm tired of people being like, that's just hysteria. You just want to get people upset. I don't know how much of that plays a role in the rest of a national thing, but I know locally where I was living and a part of my family members, I saw that. So there's a lot more to this that goes deeper that we don't actually put on blast, and we don't put, because they're able to do a lot of this in the dark.
Yeah.
Anna, you were saying?
No, echo, same thing. A lot of, some of the history of police is slave patrol. Like a lot of this is overseers who were specifically tasked with that. Like that is the history of policing in this country. And it might not be the history of every single police department, but there are strong ties to that. There are strong ties to the Klan being police chiefs in certain cities and towns, and Klan members being police officers. I believe just even like 2 weeks ago, I just saw like a sheriff or somebody just have to resign because he was saying and doing all type of racist stuff. With trainings, the videos that they show, a lot of them show victims, criminals of color in trainings. And when you're being shown that constantly, and I think, Dino, you were mentioning like, show the police officers thinking like, okay, this is my last day, or this could be my last day if I have to take this call in this neighborhood or whatever. If you're constantly being bombarded with images of them that Kimberly was talking about, like, you're going to be on edge when you see them. And that's going to impact how those relationships go. So no, it's absolutely correct that a lot of the history of just law enforcement and policing is genuinely rooted in racism. It is rooted in violence against Black and brown bodies on purpose. Like it's been like that. And it's a shame that more people don't know that, because I feel like when I talk to a lot of folks, they're surprised to learn that. But like, again, this didn't just happen overnight. It didn't start with civil rights. It didn't start with segregation. It started in slavery before certain Black and brown folks were even able to have rights or be recognized for their humanity, period. So this is not, so I'm not surprised at all to hear you say, Kimberly, that you've heard of people in communities, maybe a white nationalist or separatist or extremist or whomever, getting an opportunity to sign up and have power, because that's what it gives you. I think we all can agree, and anybody can agree, that the badge gives you power, the gun gives you power, the handcuffs gives you power, the qualified immunity and the protections that the union is going to afford you is going to provide you safety in your job to be able to allow you to maneuver kind of how you want to, unless you do something so egregious that shocks the conscience that the public outcry is so great that they're only doing this to quell the public concern. So I 100% agree with that, and I can believe that.
Go ahead, please.
Could I add this? Because I'm mixed, indigenous, and white, and so there's so much of my history that's like most people that are biracial in those ways. It's conflicting. Like half of your history and half of your history is just fucked, right? So it's tricky, but obviously. Growing up in the ways of being around more of some of the family members that talk a certain way. I'm going to tell you something that I've seen a lot of growing up in the South is people being like, I don't care if I'm poor. I don't care if you're poor, but the Black man is not going to have more money in this neighborhood than us.
At least I'm not Black. Yes.
That's And
at least I'm not Black.
Yes. I've seen situations where I've gone back home and been like, what happened to that store that a Black man owned or something, or even farms? Oh, it burned down. Why? Oh, we don't know. Arson or something. Because no one, I literally know a story of a friend of high school friend. And so she lived on a farm. We used to go visit. And there was a Black family that moved into that area of our where we lived. And, she told me years later, she said, my daddy burned, after her dad passed away, my daddy burned down that ranch. I said, what? She said, yeah, before he died, he told us in hospice that he burned the ranch down. I said, why did he tell you he burned the ranch down of the people across from where they lived? And she said,
trying to go to heaven.
Well, he couldn't. He had no problem with the Black man who owned it, but he was losing his farm, and he couldn't imagine. He couldn't drive by the rage that happened every day when he drove by and saw that the Black man had multiple cars, was doing very well for himself. His crops were doing well. He had the money. He was getting loans from the bank. It was sort of this, no, you're not supposed to be above me. And he was kind of trying to confess himself at the end, like you said, trying to get into heaven, like, oh, at least I'm trying to make it right at the end there, like the deathbed confessional. Okay, like I'm a very empathetic person, but come on now. So the thing is like this cat is really having a moment. He is jealous of any electronic that he can see, so he will have to deal with that. Sorry about that, but basically, I've seen this, and this is what I think we need to recognize. We can all like put some black circles, like people who look like me. And if you're listening to the podcast, I'm white, blonde, blue-eyed, presenting. That's what I look like. So if you look like me and you've heard the stories, you've seen the stories in your family, you know that these things are going on in your neighborhoods, your communities. You need to tell those stories. Don't just tell the stories that are passed down, that are pretty and the rebel flags and the things that's heritage, not hate, not bullshit you call for the flag reasons that you still have your rebel flag up. Tell the stories that people tell you about why your grandpa told you he did something, or he was a part of lynchings and he was proud of it, or your uncle and things like that. I don't want to get too much and trigger anyone, for reasons of that, but tell the stories to people that this is some fucked up history that your family's been a part of. It's okay to accept it without taking on shame. You didn't do it, but you need to admit that it's been done, and it's indoctrinated an entire group of people to think a certain way. Until we start sharing those stories too with our kids, like my Jaden and Maddie, they know that this is also a part of my history, not a proud part. Make that clear. You're not proud of this, but this is something that happens because unless our kids or our family members, our neighbors, or our people, friends in the North, if people think it doesn't happen in northern states, it's only southern and all that. If people don't hear about what's actually going on in these communities and the history that's happened, and I've walked into family members' home when I was growing up and seeing photos of things that were just, I don't want to describe it, but it was things that we've all seen from the KKK's history, things that they're proud of, trees and things that have images in them that we've all seen. And these are hanging in their homes in the 90s, 2000s, 2010s. This is not 1961. This is not 1941. These people are still proud of that behavior. They want to go back to that behavior if they could. So at the end of the day, like, this is not just something about, the ins and outs of, I don't know if Anna's exactly right or Dino's right on the police or Kim's just trying to be like a white savior or something and she's got white guilt or whatever. I'm probably going to get that shit on my Twitter or whatever. But at the end of the day, tell the stories that are nasty and uncomfortable as well so that you can start to understand how really deep it goes. So like Anna said, these things rooted long before. And, people tell me all the time, like, well, you should speak from the indigenous side. No, I should speak from the side that looks like this and has seen what I've seen in my family so that my kids understand a different world than what they've been told by other people to find out and believe that looks different. So I know I've taken a lot here and I've gone on some tangents, but a lot of this is just a little bit personal right now for me. Obviously, I'm a bit emotional about it, but at the end of the day, we just have to remember that this is not, we're not progressed. I'm sorry, we're not. It's well hidden. It's better hidden. It's different hidden, but we're not progressed because I'm still hearing these stories. It's still happening. And with Trump's emergence on the scene, it reignited a whole new level of people that were maybe inching toward, I don't get to behave this way, to be like, oh, hell yeah. Oh, it was tiring to put on that face every day that I wasn't so racist. Man, I can live like myself now. Like that was crazy. Like, are y'all good? Let's eat. Yeah. I'm just tired of
it will definitely be good to see how this trial comes out. And I appreciate the history lesson. It's so funny when my daughter was going, I'll say this real quick. My daughter was going into law enforcement. I explained to her that during slavery, there were these people called patty rollers. They went out and caught slaves when they ran away. When the Civil War was over, the government instituted a group of individuals because they were worried about slaves revolting against white people. They were worried about now freed slaves or now freed Africans killing white people. So they got those same patty rollers and made America's first police force. And its job was to protect white people from black people. And it seems that that's what their primary job is in this country. Let's protect white people from the black people. So
don't forget jealousy, because this photo that we talked about last week in the podcast. So if you want to know the story about why I have this photo here, because that's going to cause some stuff, and we decided I would leave it in. So I'm sure you can go back, but go listen to last week's podcast of why I have that photo and why it's in my home and the history of it. But even in that song, we talked about some of the lyrics. Tupac says, talking about the police, he says they get jealous when they see me with my mobile phone. That's another part that we don't have time to get into, but maybe another time, is this jealousy that comes from certain police officers that are like, I'm just getting paid a certain amount of money. I'm on this lower scale. And I'm seeing people that are of color, brown, black, that are living better than me, that have better cars. Like in that case of the 90s, mobile phones were not as prevalent. So just any status symbol that a person can be challenged by, especially men, that rage and that ego that I was talking about earlier will be brought into form. The power needs to be brought out again. Like, oh, you have a better house, you got a better car, you look better, you're more educated now. Well, I still have power over you. So it's the only way that they can put forth power over. I can't be as educated as you. I can't have as much money as you. I can't buy the things you have. rightfully so. And I'm not talking about, so someone's going to throw in some drug dealer, like, oh, that's just a drug dealer. No, I mean like legit, actual people that are in this country that are educated and in growing numbers, men and Karens, absolutely. But in growing numbers, like I think it's Black women are the most educated rising group of people right now. So eventually they're going to be the CEOs, the people running the companies, people in places of power. That's going to upset men, white men, and they're going to have to take power out somewhere in some way. So I think there's a lot more to this part of the conversation. And I probably went tangential on it because that's what I usually have to talk on in my communities, but in our community chats on it. And we had one today on Twitter. So I was fresh in that, but I do think we should talk on this on a bigger topic at some other point because there's just so much that we do need to educate and be educated on.
Yeah. Is there any final thoughts, Attorney Anna, before we get you out of here?
No, yeah, I agree. I think all of it is part of the larger issue, like Kimberly just was talking about, which is we have this problem in America where white people, frankly, just do not want to acknowledge negative history. And the thing that really sucks about that is that everyone else has to live with the consequences of that negative history, which is just oppression. And we still have to deal with that on a day-to-day basis while I guess whatever is going on within the white community that's trying to preserve pride without acknowledging some of the negative bits of history or really the atrocities that were committed on other people, how we even got to be the superpower we are, was really on the backs of other people. And we really do ourselves a disservice by continuing to try to ignore that, try to gloss over that, and not teach our children that, because it's just like the hostility is not going to end. But I guess if you're trying to preserve power, I guess you got to do what you got to do. So hopefully we'll get to a place before the world burns up from global warming and climate change. Hopefully we'll get to a place where we can have open and honest conversation about it. The Generation Z, the conversations and discourse that they have on social media, at least what I can see, because I'm not really a part of all of it because I'm a little bit older than them, but I'm very hopeful. I feel like they have honest and more robust discussions. They have a lot more access to information and technology, and they seem to be utilizing that. They seem to be unafraid and unashamed to call people out. They seem to be very vigilant about people's rights, about people's feelings, about what the world should look like, because the world has been jacked up since they've been in it, unfortunately. So I'm really excited, at least that we can look forward to this new group of young folks who's going to be able to really make some substantial changes and do something about it. So when they get to be the ages that we are, and when they get to be older folks that maybe, if we're all still here, the world is a way better place to be in, or at least the country is a way better country for their children to inhabit.
All right. We can catch analysis on Dig on America when?
Well, it's going to be starting in September, beginning of September, end of August. So check me out, Attorney Anna, with the analysis. And I'm usually on Dig on America on Wednesdays, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern time. So I'm usually on there every Wednesday.
And where can they find you on social media?
Oh, yes. There goes Anna. If you like sewing or you like just funny memes, I do it all. So yeah, I make my own clothes. Yeah, I'm very tall. You can't tell, but I'm 6 feet tall. So I have to make stuff for myself. You know, my arm's kind of long. It's giving Space Jam. So yeah.
Like, maybe we'll get a Dig on America Attorney Anna outfit t-shirt line coming out.
So listen, it's on the way. You already read my mind. It's on the way. In the meantime, if you want to see me make other stuff, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, the whole, the young people got me on TikTok now. So I've been all up and through the social media.
Love it.
Mm-hmm. It's fun.
There goes Anna.
But thanks for having me, you guys. I really appreciate it. Thank you all in the Facebook comments for the questions, and I really appreciate the discussion. Keep having it, and I'm looking forward to the rest of you guys' show. Thank you, Attorney Anna.
Thank you so much, Anna.
I am Dino Moore. You can find me on Instagram at Dino_Moore, DINO_MOORE, and on Twitter at Dino Moore Films. She is Kimberly K. Scott, and you can find her at
You can find me at Dear Kimberly K on Instagram, Twitter, and on Facebook. You can find me under Not a Basic Life, but you can find me, but I probably will hide from you on Facebook. You can also get in touch with both Dino and I in our messages on DMs in Twitter, Instagram, anywhere that you'd like to find us there. We primarily hang around, I believe, Twitter, Instagram-ish kind of places. So if you'd like to see something on the show, there's somebody you would like us to reach out to if you'd like to be on the show. If you feel like you have a story that really should be told in the form of breaking barriers, being uncomfortable with being comfortable with the uncomfortable conversations, or two sides of anything that is going on, please let us know. We will be bringing stories to you each week. We have who coming up next week, Dino?
Next week, we're going to do that. We're finally going to do the CRT conversation. We got a couple good, an Atlanta school teacher coming in and a Twitter, YouTube, heavyweight who is, he's hard right. We got Jason and Marissa, they're left angled, but this guy is hard right. So we're going to have a good time.
I knew we were in for a treat when his Twitter name involves Alpha. I was
exactly.
Oh, okay.
It's
so it'll be a good conversation.
Definitely, we'll get the word out about that to you
and
guys.
Then in 2 weeks, we've got the story on the McGruff Crime Stopper dog that we all had some controversy over back in the day. We'll be talking to the national director of that program, so that we'll be doing that as well. So just a couple of topics coming forward, but just remember, each week you can find us at the beginning of the show talking about current events and hot topics in the breakdown. So do not wait to come into the show. You want to catch the first part live before it goes out to our listeners on YouTube and on a podcast.
Yes, it is Alpha Warrior, Shy Guy. You are right. So,
is it Shy Guy? I was like Chi Guy because I'm all like Zen and shit. So I'm
he's big on spaces and a lunatic. Hey, you know what, Alpha Warrior?
I don't know him, but
bring him on, man. We want to hear what he's got to say. We got to hear from all sides, and Alpha Warrior is a hard right guy. So, thank you for joining us. Our time is up.
Thank you for having me as your co-host.
Oh, thank you for joining. What are you talking about? You make me look so much better. So you raise my stock.
Yeah, I love when you get animated. You're like,
yeah, exactly. Thank you guys for joining Breaking Berries. We will see you same time next week.